The woman I loved, who was once my rock, turned our own home into the stage for her cruelest performance. After a perfectly calculated fall, the threat wasn't screamed, it was whispered from the floor, presenting a grim choice: sell the house or be branded a wife-beater. She knew better than anyone that for a cop, honor is everything, and she had turned my own principles into the perfect weapon against me. They say you should protect your family at all costs, but what do you do when the person threatening to ruin your life is the one you once swore to protect? My name is Mark. I'm a detective with the Economic Crimes Division. 10 years on the job is long enough to understand the true value of honor and integrity behind the numbers, the contracts, and the polished lies. I'm not a loud man, nor do I chase the spotlight. I just need to stick to my principles, do my job, and protect the house my parents left me, the only place that reminds me a family once existed. The irony is, the most complex case I've ever had to face wasn't in any case file. It began at the dinner table in my own home, with my wife, Clara. It didn't start with a blazing argument or a shocking secret brought to light. It began quietly, like a small crack in a wall you pretend not to see, day after day. Dinner, which used to be our time, was now filled with only the clinking of silverware and Clara's stories about her boss, Richard. Richard closed another huge deal today. He said he's treating the whole department to a resort getaway. I'd just nod. Yeah, good for you. Then she'd give me the look I'd grown so familiar with lately, a mix of pity and disappointment. Mark, have you ever thought about moving into a different field? Your job, it's just so stagnant. My job isn't stagnant. It's just not as glamorous as her marketing world. I didn't say that. I just quietly finished my meal. I was hurt, of course, but I'm not the type to slam my fist on the table. My silence wasn't weakness. It was an effort, an attempt to hold on to something. What filled my head in those moments wasn't her criticism, but the image of Clara from 5 years ago, back when I was a beat cop, coming home in a faded uniform, worn out after a long shift. She was the one who would make me a hot cup of tea, sit down, and listen patiently as I mumbled about the petty details of my day. There were nights, after a particularly rough case, when my mind would be reeling with the worst images, and Clara was the only one who could pull me out of that darkness with just a hug. She used to be my rock, so I told myself that woman was still in there, that this cold, ambitious shell was temporary, just the result of pressure from her new, high-powered job. I believed that if I was just patient, she would come back. Thinking back now, maybe a detective is the worst person at judging those closest to him. I look for logic, for evidence, but I overlooked a simple truth. People can change. And Clara had changed. Friday, I got home around 7, tired after a week of combing through the books of a company suspected of tax fraud. Clara was already there, sitting on the living room sofa, not watching TV. Her work dress was still perfectly pressed, a sign she'd been home for a while, waiting. She heard my key in the lock and looked up. No smile. I need to talk to you, she said. I set my briefcase down. I'm listening. I want a divorce. She said it as if she were announcing tomorrow's weather. No hesitation, no emotion, just a raw fact dropped into the middle of the room. I stared at her, searching for any sign, a joke, a flicker of anger, anything, but there was nothing. I can't live with someone so complacent, Mark, she continued, her voice flat. Richard can give me a better life. I didn't ask what a better life was. I knew the answer would be things I didn't have and didn't want. A detective learns there are questions you don't need to ask when the answer is right in front of you. She stood and walked to the corner of the room. A small suitcase was already packed, something I hadn't noticed. She never looked at me once. Every move was calculated, decisive. The sound of the suitcase wheels rolling across the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. When the front door opened, the headlights of a luxury car outside flooded the living room. Richard was waiting, his hand resting casually on the steering wheel, a smug smirk visible through the glass. I heard the solid thud of a car door opening and closing. The door clicked shut behind her. The house fell into a frightening silence. I didn't chase after her. I didn't call her name. I just stood there, listening until the sound of the engine faded into the distance. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty street. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. The shock was so profound it took me a few moments to draw a deep breath. I thought I was prepared for anything, But no training manual teaches you how to handle watching your wife leave with another man right in front of you. The pain wasn't just betrayal. It was the complete collapse of the trust I had placed in one person, the person I believed would never turn her back on me. And now, every warm memory I had clung to had been shattered in a single evening. A few silent days passed. I did a half-hearted job of clearing out the few things Clara had left behind, trying to get used to the empty space in the house. Then she called. Her voice was still cold, devoid of remorse. "I need to come by and get the rest of my personal things." "Fine," I replied, not wanting to prolong the conversation. She came alone that afternoon. No fancy car, no Richard. I thought for a moment this might be a chance for a real conversation, but I was wrong. She got straight to the point the second the door closed. "I've spoken to my lawyer. This house, legally, we have to sell it and split the proceeds." I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my arms crossed. "This was my parents' house, Clara. You know that. It was deeded to you after we were married, which makes it marital property," she recited, the words clearly fed to her. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Mark." "I'm not selling," I said, my voice firm. This was my final line in the sand. That's when I saw her expression shift. The coldness was replaced by a calculated agitation. She started raising her voice, repeating baseless accusations, deliberately escalating the argument, while I stood my ground, repeating only that one sentence. "I'm not selling." I saw her give me a quick, sharp glance. It was a look full of intent. And then she fell. It wasn't a slip. It was a deliberate act. She threw herself down the last few steps of the staircase, enough to make a sickening thud, enough to ensure there would be bruises. Instinct took over. I lunged forward to help her. "Clara, are you insane?" I helped her sit up. She winced in pain, but when she looked up at me, her eyes held none of the fear of someone who had just fallen. They were ice cold. While I was still reeling, she whispered, her voice a low hiss meant only for me, "Sell the house. If not, I'll tell everyone you pushed me. You know better than anyone what an assault accusation from a wife will do to your career." I let go of her as if I'd been burned. I saw the bruise already forming, the way she held her arm, the disheveled hair on the floor, all just enough for a forensics camera to do its job. I asked a single dry question. "Are you okay?" She smirked, her voice a vague murmur. "I'm fine. But if I have to, I'll talk." A moment later, my phone rang. I pulled it out. The name Richard flashed on the screen. I answered, saying nothing. His voice came through, dripping with smugness. "Listen here, detective. You're a smart guy, so make the smart choice. A house, or your entire career and reputation? Clara will file the report tomorrow if you don't play ball. You get it, right?" His voice was filled with the confidence of a man who thinks he's already won. In my line of work, we call it a reputation strike, suspension, badge, and weapon confiscated, an internal affairs investigation. I heard him finish with a reminder, "My lawyer will handle the rest." It was all planned. When he hung up, I stood there, watching Clara, who was still on the floor. The anger that rose in me wasn't hot. It was a cold burn, enough to make me perfectly clear-headed. I said nothing. I did what my training taught me to do, preserve the scene by minimizing contact, observing every detail, and already compiling a mental checklist of evidence to gather. I knew I was standing on the edge of two worlds. On one side was my parents' house, on the other, the career I had built with my own sweat. They had made their move. They had opened a legal path to drive a stake right through the heart of my profession, and like any other case, if I wanted to survive, I had to gather evidence before they could turn their words into a file. I took the camera from the kitchen drawer, a professional habit. I always keep one in the house, and started taking pictures. No emotion, just methodical movements, angles, lighting, the details of the bruise. Clara sat there, watching me with a confused look, probably thinking I was so broken I was resorting to meaningless actions. With every click of the shutter, I closed another door on their ability to alter the story. Clara left shortly after, leaving me alone in the suffocatingly quiet house. This time, the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with threats, with the crushing weight of a ruined future. I didn't sit down. I paced the living room, my mind racing. I am a detective. I live and breathe procedure. And I knew better than anyone how that same procedure would now be used to crush me. A domestic violence accusation. Those 3 words were enough to trigger a nightmare. An internal affairs investigation would be launched immediately. I'd be summoned, questioned by my own colleagues. My badge and weapon would be confiscated. I'd be suspended, put on desk duty, shuffling papers while I awaited my fate. And that was just the beginning. The incident would be a permanent stain on my record. Even if I was cleared, the label, detective accused of assaulting his wife, would follow me for the rest of my career. Every time I testified in court, the defense attorney would use it to attack my credibility. My superiors would look at me differently. My partners would whisper behind my back. I had no witnesses. This house has no cameras. All I had was my word against hers and the very real bruises on her body. To the outside world, I was a big guy, a cop, and she was a woman. It wasn't hard to see which way the scales would tip. The next day, I went to see my lawyer, an old, trusted friend. I told him everything, leaving out no detail. He listened, his expression growing more grave by the minute. When I finished, he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Mark, this is a nightmare scenario. Legally, they've put you in an unwinnable position. We can fight it, but the process alone will destroy you. The accusation will be made public. You'll lose everything before we ever get a chance to prove you're innocent." He was right. They didn't need to win in court. They just had to fire the shot. Whether it hit or missed, my career would be shattered by the shrapnel. I left his office in a daze. For the first time in 10 years, I felt powerless. They had turned the very principles and integrity I'd always fought for into my greatest liability. Now, I had only 2 options. Lose the house, my family's last legacy, or lose everything else, my career, my honor, and the very ideals I lived by. It wasn't a choice. It was a sentence. I spent the next 2 days in a suspended state. I went to the precinct and worked like a machine, processing paperwork, but my mind was blank. My lawyer's words echoed in my ears. At night, I'd sit in the living room, staring at the staircase where the performance had taken place. Despair is a strange thing. It's like drowning. The more you struggle, the faster you sink. On the 3rd night, as I was looking at the old wedding photo on the wall, a thought sparked in my mind. If this were a case, what would I do? Not my case, but a case I was assigned. The victim is a guy being framed. The perpetrator is his wife. Where would I start? That question was like flipping a switch. The professional instincts I had honed for a decade kicked in. I was no longer the betrayed husband. I was a detective, and I was analyzing my own case. I sat down at my desk and took out a blank sheet of paper. Hypothesis: Clara and Richard planned this. Objective: seize the house. Method: stage an assault for blackmail. Conclusion: any plan, no matter how perfect, leaves a trail. I started reviewing everything, not with emotion, but with logic. I had no witnesses, no video, but a plan like this couldn't have been just verbal. It required communication, instructions, and what was the most common method of communication in their world? Email, text messages, conversations. And then I remembered Clara's old tablet, the one she'd tossed in my desk drawer over a year ago after getting a new one. She'd said it was old and slow, not worth using anymore. I opened the drawer. It was still there, covered in a thin layer of dust. The wallpaper was still our wedding picture. I picked it up, a sharp pang of pain hitting me. The power button, the screen lit up, still holding nearly a 40% charge. She hadn't used it in a long time, and maybe because of that, she'd forgotten the most basic rule: log out. The email app icon was still there. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over it for a second before I tapped. The inbox loaded. Hundreds of promotional emails, social media notifications. I typed Richard into the search bar. The results popped up. A lot of work-related emails. But then I saw it, an email chain from about 3 weeks ago, right after Richard's promotion. The subject line: the exit strategy. My heart started to pound. I opened the email chain. It was all there. The plan, laid out in chilling detail. How to act distant, how to bring up the divorce, even the legal research to ensure they could force a sale of the house. And then I read the final entry, sent by Richard. Don't worry, if he won't agree to sell, just go with plan B. Start an argument and take a fall on the stairs. A few bruises will be enough. After that, let me and the lawyer handle the rest. Internal affairs will keep him so busy, he'll have to give up the house just to save his career. I read that sentence over and over. The hand holding the tablet was shaking, not from fear, but from something else. A bone-deep cold, followed by a slow, simmering rage. They had made a mistake. A fatal one. They wrote it down. The rage rose and then quickly subsided. I am a detective, and the first thing a detective does upon finding evidence is preserve it. I carefully placed the tablet on the desk. With a steady hand, I used my phone to photograph the entire email chain, making sure every word was clear. Then, I logged into my own email and forwarded the entire chain from Clara's tablet to myself, creating an undeniable digital copy. Finally, I turned off the tablet and sealed it in an evidence bag I always kept in my briefcase. Every move was precise and methodical. I had what I needed. This wasn't the time for emotion. This was the time for strategy. I understood the boundaries. This was evidence for a civil case, a divorce. I would not use my position as a cop to threaten or arrest anyone. I would let the law do its work. But this time, the law would be on my side. The next morning, I didn't go to the precinct. I called in for a day of personal leave and made an immediate appointment with my lawyer. I sat across from him, pushing the sealed bag with the tablet and a stack of printed screenshots across the desk. "Take a look at this," I said. He picked it up, scanned the first few pages, then slowed down. His glasses slid down his nose. He reread the email about Plan B, then looked up at me. The worry on his face was gone, replaced by a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Mark," he said, his voice filled with excitement, "this isn't just evidence. This is a confession. We didn't make a scene. No angry phone calls. My lawyer simply drafted a letter, as short and cold as an indictment. It was sent to Clara's lawyer's office that same afternoon. The letter didn't just include copies of the most critical emails. It also clearly analyzed the criminal offenses they had committed based on their own written words. I could picture the scene in that fancy law office across town, the frantic call from their lawyer to Clara and Richard, their smug confidence shattering. The trap they had set had just snapped shut on them. Just 2 hours later, my lawyer got a call. He put it on speaker. The voice of the other lawyer had lost all its usual confidence. It was now rushed, almost pleading. "Can we talk? There seems to be some misunderstanding here." My lawyer's reply was calm. "There is nothing to talk about. Our ultimatum is clear. Your clients have engaged in perjury, fabricating evidence, and conspiracy to commit extortion. These are not just torts in a civil suit, they are criminal felonies. We need some time. You have 24 hours from the time you received the letter," my lawyer cut in. "Either my client receives a consent, divorce agreement, in which Miss Clara waives all claims to all assets, especially the house, or this entire file, including the tablet, will be on the desk of the district attorney's office Monday morning. The choice is yours." He hung up. Silence filled the office. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The game was over, and I hadn't had to break a single one of my own principles. I had simply found the truth. They didn't wait 24 hours. The next morning, less than 12 hours after the ultimatum, my lawyer received an email. Attached was a new draft of the divorce agreement. It was short. Clara agreed to an uncontested divorce, waiving all claims to any property. The house was not mentioned. Everything moved quickly after that. Papers were signed. The proceedings were finalized. Clara disappeared from my life as suddenly as she had walked out of it. I heard she quit her job and moved to another city. Richard, the mastermind, also went quiet. Maybe he learned that not everything can be arranged with money and schemes. His reputation in the business world undoubtedly took a hit after this humiliating failure. On the day the divorce was finalized, I didn't celebrate. I just drove home. I walked into the silent house. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy or menacing. It was peaceful. I had protected it. I had protected my family's last legacy, and more importantly, I had protected myself. I didn't feel triumphant, no sense of a loud victory. I just felt a profound sense of relief. I had faced the biggest storm of my life, not with force or dirty tricks. I had won with calmness, with analysis, and with a belief in the process, the very qualities that had defined me and my career. That evening, I took out the old box of my parents' photographs. I sat in the living room, alone, looking through each one, their smiles, their eyes. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was a place full of love, the place where I grew up. And it was still standing. I had made it through. My marriage may have ended in lies, but I had ended it with the truth. My job is to find justice for other people. This time, I had found it for myself. And that was a feeling strong enough to start over, whole and unbroken.